Hello and welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, healer, tarot enthusiast, and your local witch next door. And today I'm talking about tarot and Yarrow. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. Thanks so much for those of you who were able to attend my recent virtual tarot card creation event. If you signed up but were unable to make it to the live event, you should have the replay of the event recording, the PDF I made with my step-by-step process, and an offer to join my upcoming series called Tarot for Transformation, so check your emails for that. If you weren't able to attend live or didn't register in time, no worries. You can get the whole package, the full hour-long recording with my step-by-step method, examples of the tarot cards I've created, journaling questions, and a 15-page PDF to walk you through it for just $33. So the link will be in the show notes to purchase that now. Also, I'm going to be offering a 12-week Tarot for Transformation live course this summer. So if you're interested, there's a link to sign up for more information in the show notes as well. This course will be starting at the end of August. We'll spend 12 weeks together, each week going through a different major arcana card, learning about it, journaling. We're going to be using Drea Bloom's book, Tarot for Transformation, which is all about Tarot for Transformation through all of the major arcana cards. So we'll be sampling 12 of those, and I'll be walking you through that process, doing it with you. We'll have weekly calls that will be recorded if you're unable to make them live. But yeah, we'll talk about the card, embodying it, how to incorporate it into your week, what it looks like to transform through that card, doing some journaling and sharing if you're open to that. So like I said, if you're interested, the link will be in the show notes to check that out. You're not committed if you sign up. You'll just be on my list for more information as I start to send out more of that. All right, so if you love the show, the best way to support it for free is by listening daily, leaving a review, and subscribing or following in your favorite podcast app. Not my favorite, but your favorite. I also just updated my Patreon benefits to be bigger and better than ever. So every month I will be hosting New Moon live tarot readings, and if you join the lovers level of the podcast on the Patreon, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord to chat with me live during the stream, and I'll pull a card for each one of my patrons in addition to the New Moon Collective spread. So if you want an individual card pulled just for you once a month live on the podcast, join the Everyday Tarot Patreon family at the lovers level. And I think, yep, if I'm right, so the full moon was last week. So we have this week, and then next Thursday, I believe, will be the next new moon live. So I try to do it on the day of. So I will get that sent out hopefully sometime this week, so you can get that scheduled as to when I'm going to be live. I'll have it streaming on YouTube, on Instagram, and Facebook, all at the same time. So yeah, you can start if you want. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel to make sure to get those notifications when I go live. And yeah, that will be very fun. So if you'd like to support the podcast even further, you can get a one-time 5-card individual reading in addition to all the other benefits if you join the Witch Bitch level on the Patreon. If you're local to the Greater Puget Sound area, I always have local events through my Let's Talk Tarot meetup group. So like I said, last week we had a full moon women's circle, which was so lovely. I really needed that circle on the full moon. It was very helpful to me. My friend and colleague, Izzy, who is Rise Beyond Trauma, online, on Instagram. I'm just checking to make sure. But yeah, if you want to follow her, she co-facilitated with me, which was lovely. So yeah, that's kind of an example of what events I might be posting on the Tarot Meetup group. I just posted our next social meetup, which just means we'll hang out at a restaurant. We'll meet there on Sunday, July 27th from 1 to 3 p.m. them at the Tacoma McMinimans, the Elks Lodge 1. We'll meet in the bottom floor of there. There's 5 different bars in there. So if you go in the entrance on Broadway and go all the way down the stairs, you will find the Old Hangout, which is a tiki lounge. And we will just get a table there. Bring your tarot cards, bring your questions, bring your obsession with tarot like me, and we'll just talk all about it and hang out. So that is our next event coming up. If you're local, and if you're not local and you're interested in my free PDF with the 2025 5-card tarot spread I created just for you at the beginning of this year, you can get that by joining my newsletter list. My weekly newsletter always has the most up-to-date information on my upcoming events, presentations, musings, and more. And if you like seeing me this information written out or checking it out on my website, you can always do that. If you're listening to the podcast, you're enjoying the tarot, but you want some of those concrete dates written down for you, you can always look in the show notes or go on my website to see that. And then if you don't already know, I'm a sex and relationships therapist, seeing clients virtually all over Washington State. I love working with queer, poly, and witchy clients. If you'd like to work with a therapist that doesn't judge you, is witchy just like you, and helps you learn how to deal with anxiety, chronic pain or illness, communication issues, self-advocacy, and sex, head to my website and book a free consultation now to start your journey. You can find the links for any of these offers in the show notes or on my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot, in addition to the images of the cards I pull on each episode. All right, so welcome to season 11, where I'm talking all about tarot and plant allies. If you haven't listened to my other seasons yet, you can go ahead and check those out. In season 1, I talked tarot basics. In seasons 2 and 3, I went through all the major arcana cards and an overview of the 4 suits. In season 4, I talked tarot and pop culture. Season 5, I went through 13 common tarot spreads. Season 6, 7, 8, and 9, I went through all the suits with wands, pentacles, swords, and cups. And last season, I talked all about tarot and the intersection with witchcraft. And like I said, here we are in lovely season 11, where I'm talking about tarot and plant allies. And today we're talking about tarot and yarrow. So throughout this episode, I will give a plant description. We'll talk about plant magic. I'll talk about its relation to the tarot, and then some uses for the plant or working with it. All right, so let's get into a plant description of yarrow. So I've been using this lovely coloring book I have, the Medicinal Herb Coloring Book by Omani Omejer and Nicole Rose. I have it linked in the show notes if you're interested. I bought it a while ago and I've been making my way through it. So on the yarrow page, which I've lovely and colored, yarrow is known as Achillea millefolium in Latin, and yarrow is a perennial herb found in disturbed ground, grasslands, and gardens worldwide. It has a powerful styptic action, which means it stops blood from cuts, gums, nosebleeds, and even internal bleeding or hemorrhage. As a diaphoretic, yarrow can help the body to sweat during a fever. Its antimicrobial properties make it useful during acute infections, such as within the urinary tract. Yarrow's affinity for the blood makes it useful as a component of treatment for conditions such as varicose veins, hypotension, and inflammation in the joints. As a carminative bitter, yarrow also supports the digestive system. Yarrow is not appropriate during pregnancy or generally for long-term use. So yeah, that is kind of the plant and what it does. If you want to know what it looks like, you can look in the show notes. I will have an image there of the plant itself taken from my yard. And yeah, you can always Google it as well. But yarrow has a pretty skinny stem. It has very soft leaves that come out from the stem, or kind of have short stems and then with kind of frilly leaves, I guess that would be called. They're quite small for leaves, and yarrow itself is, even the flowering part is often very small. Like I said, I usually see it in rocky, kind of like disturbed grounds. Gravel is like where I usually see it. At my parents' property, they have a gravel driveway, and yarrow just grows in their driveway like a weed. It gets pretty, it can get maybe a foot or taller. It has different colored flowers. So the one I have right now that's in my yard is kind of a whitish cream. Flowers, and maybe if I had left it a little longer, the flowers would have opened a bit more. We've maybe have gotten some yellows. Sometimes they're a light pink color or more purpley. I think those are all the ones I've seen, but I guess it can come in different colors. And like I said, it's just like there's different varieties. Again, sometimes you see it, it'll be very close to the ground, almost like a carpet, and you might not see the flower stalk. So of course, the flower stalk is often produced under like challenging conditions for the plant, like in gravel, where it doesn't have a lot of nutrients, it doesn't have a lot of like water, or maybe it's getting driven over or something like that. But often when I see it, if you see it more in like a grassy, I've seen it in like pastures before, then you often just see the leaf parts. So you would see kind of like a clump of almost look like mini ferns. They're much softer than ferns, and they're not actually in the fern family. But if you pet them, they would be very soft to the touch. They sort of would squish under your hand. They wouldn't break or anything, but you can kind of go back and forth over it. And I like I said, it'd be like a nice little pillow. My friend has a horse pasture, and when I went to see her, how she was regenerating her pasture for her horses out where I live, I identified some yarrow for her, and then she made a yarrow salve later because she'd learned about yarrow, but she hadn't identified it in her yard before. She made a salve with it, and then she gifted that back to me later, which was very nice. This was someone I knew from my grad program. Shout out to Haley. So yarrow, widely used, right? Like they said in here, for blood, like clotting, not really clotting, but kind of stopping it. So it can be used in very different things, very versatile. But again, often used as, just seen as a nice flower as well. Sometimes it's used as almost like filler in a flower bouquet. It doesn't have very strongly colored flowers. They're sort of bunching, and they do they're not quite the total flat umbrella. So when I talk about umbrella flowers, usually it means that they do a lot of bunching, they have a lot of stems, and then all the flowers are on the same flat level, almost like an upside down umbrella, if you were going to use it as a mini umbrella, it would shield you. So this one is sort of like that. It's not as flat as something like fennel or like parsley or carrot flowers, but it does sort of look like that, branching in that way, and has a lot of bunches of small flowers. All right, so let's get into some of the plant magic. In the Hearth Witches Compendium, which I've been referencing by Anna Franklin, they talk about yarrows being associated with the male principle, midsummer, healing, divination, clairvoyance, aura cleansing, protection, ruled by the planet Venus and the element of water, sacred to Cernunnos, Herne, and Pan. I think of yarrow as related to boundaries, which is interesting. That's not necessarily something that's specifically named here, although if we think about protection, we often think about boundaries. Literally what came to mind earlier was that yarrow will cut a bitch, which is not true, but it made me laugh because that was what came to mind of yarrow is really good about protection. And protecting you, but also kind of funny because if you literally got cut, you could put yarrow in it and it would stop the bleeding. So sort of the opposite of cutting someone. But yeah, it's also seen as being informative in divination or healing, right? It is, Yeah, it's like a soft essence, but also, like I said, protective and yeah, I like a little stabby, honestly. That's just what comes to mind. And maybe it is that aspect of it that is, like I said, like protection or even related in healing, right? If we think about healing, sometimes the way that things heal, sometimes we have to, right? We have to clean them out, or we have to, right, stitch things back together, or by like a healing process. The word healing sounds very nice and like soft, but often the healing process is very traumatic to the body, right, to the wound. Again, ideally not, but in some cases, right, if something heals incorrectly or if it gets, infected or something, like often we have to do measures to clean it out in that way, which is just kind of interesting. Having learned about, the plant description, is that it is related to healing, right? It's related to open wounds, which again, if you think about open wounds, a thing that would help with that would be protection or boundaries. And then, that it has this sort of divination, clairvoyance aspect to it, which is interesting. I don't know if people like burn yarrow at all, like in like how you might other plants like sage for cleansing or something for like divining. I sort of imagine so, but I'm not quite sure. That's just kind of what I'm imagining. Maybe I'll look it up real quick. So let's talk about, let's go into some of the relation to tarot here with Yarrow. All right, so let's get into the relation to the tarot. So I read, let's see, what's this blog called again? forestmedicine.net, and I have it linked in the show notes, but I was looking up Yarrow and seeing if there were like strict relationships to the tarot, and I found this blog talking about Yarrow and its relationship to the magician. They talk about, I think this makes sense as we sort of think about like the clairvoyance, the aura protection, the sort of even boundaries as being sort of a magician quality, like cutting through bullshit, like giving a lot of abilities, right? Helping, I think if you like people consume Yarrow, like I said, okay, so warning, right? Yarrow can be psychoactive, so be careful. But I know some people will infuse it in water and drink it like a tea, but in like a cold water infusion. Always do your research before consuming plants in that way, especially if you know they're going to be psychoactive. But it says it heightens sensory perception. And again, this is probably along with its association to sort of clairvoyance or divination. I should look it up in my Plants of the Gods book, which is a book all about what plants have been used as drugs across human culture and history. And just how many have been. As humans, we love to experiment with food and plants and trying to understand them, and food as plants as medicine. And so Yarrow definitely falls into that, increasing energetic awareness, helping us tune into our surrounding spaces. Again, important when we think about protection or boundaries, right? Being aware of our space, where we are in, what is near us, what we might not be aware of on the outside or coming closer. And Yarrow, what else do they talk about? They talk about Achilles, the Greek warrior, with studying with Chiron. I actually just read the Song of Achilles book by Madeline Miller. I'm going to make sure, but yes, Madeline Miller, who also wrote Circe, so sort of, modern retellings of classic Greek history. Anyway, with that, they talk about that yarrow kind of looks like a spear, like the leaf part of it does. And so it sort of, and it comes from this Old English word meaning spear well. And it's interesting because, again, it is a healer of wounds, maybe caused by spears. Again, if we think historically, or being treated in wounds in battle. And yeah, and this is related to the story of Achilles, who studied with the centaur Chiron, who's the archetypal symbol of the wounded healer. And working with yarrow is sort of known, again, in this sort of relation as the herb of the wounded healer, sealing energetic wounds, restoring proper boundaries to our energetic skins in the same ways it heals wounds to a physical body. So I thought that that was kind of interesting. So I pulled some magician cards that I have from different decks to sort of be with us as we think about yarrow. So I have the Goddess of Love deck by Gabriella Herstick and illustrated by Julie Popescu. In this one, the magician is renamed the Enchantress here. We have the Ophidia Rosa Tarot by Leela and Olive, where here the magician is depicted as a snake eating its own tail, also known as the Ouroboros. This deck is very flowery, so there's a flower on it. It doesn't look like it's yarrow, but I just like thinking about that. It's a very plant magic related deck. And then we also have the Therapist Who Tarot deck version of the magician here, which is created by watercolors done by Rebecca Bloom and prompts done by Drea Bloom. So this deck does not have a tarot deck guidebook, but it has prompts on the back of each card, reflection questions. So here it talks about the magician as being focused. Again, if we think about boundaries or intention or divination, focus is very important in all of those things. And the reflection questions on the back say, whom do you love and who loves you? How can you best focus on self-care this week? And how can you best protect your heart? Again, heart medicine right here as yarrow, so very interesting. All right, so let's get into some uses. So I talked about, psychoactive uses of yarrow, which I've never done, but I did read about here. I did read many different things. Like I said, yarrow has been used like medicinally, but we're going to talk about just some different kind of uses in addition to that. So there's yarrow wine. It says yarrow is one of the sacred herbs of midsummer, makes a suitable drink at the solstice ritual. It also promotes clairvoyance, like we talked about. So this one calls for 3 quarts of yarrow, 4 pounds of sugar, rind and juice of 4 oranges, and yeast and nutrient. And you mix all that together, basically simmer it, put it in a brewing bin and cool it, add the yeast, and then you ferment for 14 days and strain it and fit on an airlock to make wine. Again, make sure you know how to do that, and you have airlock devices and things like that. You have to be careful with fermentation because things can explode if you're brewing or making wine. But again, you can definitely do it. Just make sure you have the proper tools and that you're not DIYing it too much, because that can be dangerous when we're making things that we're going to consume. Also, other ways to use yarrow that I was interested in, they talk about it. You can use it as a steam inhalation for healing. So steam inhalations of herbs may be used to relieve cold symptoms or hay fever. And they talk about yarrow being for hay fever, so like allergies. So they talk about, to make a steam inhalation, you add 1 pint of herbal infusion or decoction to the bath water and soak. For the steam inhalation, so that would be in a bath. But for steam, you do 2 pints of boiling water and 2 teaspoons of the herb. Pour the boiling water over the herb, and with a towel over your head, inhale the vapor for about 5 minutes. So if you're having bad allergies and you have yarrow growing nearby, you can use 2 teaspoons, right? That's not so much. The plant I have in front of me is certainly that much there. So you could try that out if you're having bad allergies. What else do we have here? I read about yarrow being used as an insect repellent. You can burn it, I read. So that is one way to do it. This one talks about making an infusion with it. So you pack the flowers into a clear glass jar. So with this, you would need a lot of flowers. So you either have to be growing a lot of yarrow or have access to a lot of it. If you're going to do this, you cover all the flowers with vodka in a jar, put on a lid, leave on a sunny windowsill for 2 weeks, shaking daily. Strain into a clear jar, and to use, dilute with a little water and apply to the skin to repel ticks, mosquitoes, and flies. So that's kind of cool as well. And then finally, oh yeah, the other thing I wanted to talk about was that in here they talk about a little bit more about other uses for yarrow and some of the magical virtues that we talked about. So they say yarrow here, they're talking about the essential oil. And they say this thin, sweet, spicy oil is extracted from the dried herb by steam distillation. So again, how all essential oils work. It improves circulatory disorders such as varicose veins and hemorrhoids. It may reduce high blood pressure. It may help irregular menstruation and menopausal problems. It can be used for inflamed wounds, rashes, cuts, eczema, scars, and burns. In hair preparations, it can stimulate hair growth, and yarrow blends well with angelica, cedarwood, and verbena. And I feel like angelica is another common divination plant, but I could be wrong. So it says, caution, avoid during pregnancy, may irritate sensitive skin. So the magical virtues associated with it are exorcism, banishing, protection, purification, psychic awareness, and divination. So very powerful. And like we talked about earlier, the deities associated with it are Cernunnos, Herne, and Pan. The only one I'm familiar with there is Pan. I might have to look up the other ones, see what those are about. It's associated with the planet of Venus and the element of water. So those are, some uses. Again, this compendium is quite large, so I just kind of look up each plant in the back. But yeah, the compendium's about 500 pages. So there's lots of cool things to make in here. And this is, the Hearth Witch's Compendium, Magical and Natural Living for Every Day by Anna Franklin. And the link will be in the show notes if you want to go check out that book there. But yeah, so let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today. What does Yarrow have to say to us? Yarrow, boundaries. Where do we need to be setting our boundaries? Where can we protect ourselves? What are we divining? What are we seeing for the future? So I'm going to grab a deck. I'm going to give it a shuffle there. I'm going to use the Sacerabito Tarot by Stasia Burrington. This was my first deck. All of my decks, I was at Tacoma Pride this weekend, having a booth there, talking about my podcast, handing out podcast stickers. So if you were there, hello, thanks for stopping by. And I was pulling cards for folks, so that was super fun. So all of my decks were well used this weekend. It was very fun to see which decks stood out to people. I was asking folks, which deck speaks to you, and I'll pull a card from that one. People were really loving the Ophidia Rosa by Leela and Olive, and also the Goddess of Love deck by Gabrielle Herstick and illustrated by Julia Popescu. But yeah, here I'm using the Sacerabito Tarot by Stasia Burrington. This one is a local artist to me in the Pacific Northwest, and there was someone else that came to Tacoma Pride that was like, oh, I have that deck. So that's very fun. I don't think I've ever met anyone that actually has this deck, because it is like a local artist. All right, Yarrow, what do you have to tell us? Okay, I pulled the Knight of Swords reversed. Let's see here. Knight of Swords reverse. It's so upright. The Knight of Swords would be about frank, logical, swift, tactless, kind of cutting through. Again, like what we talked about with Yarrow, cutting through actions, cutting through the bullshit, moving swiftly. It literally says to cut through the bullshit. That's funny. Working logically, intelligent, authoritative, and blunt. So reversed, right, this would be maybe when we're going a little too far with that, when we're acting hastily, recklessly, getting tunnel visioned. It says, in a quest to fulfill an intellectual pursuit, are you hurting others? Your words are sharp. Are you using them well? Okay, so again, when we think about boundaries, right, we think about clairvoyance or seeing, thinking about the future, thinking about, our own healing, right? This makes me think of, right, making sure that, right, even if we feel like we know the answer or what worked for us, that doesn't mean it's going to work for other people. Or even if it does work for other people, that doesn't always mean that they're ready to hear it, unfortunately. I think the best way that we as humans learn is by doing ourselves. So, right, maybe model what's working for you. But, right, sometimes our words can be very cutting also, right? We can really cut through the bullshit, but sometimes that can be hurtful. So this, right, Yarrow is telling us, okay, beware the double-edged sword. And here, of course, the Knight of Swords has a sword in front of them. They also have sort of, it looks like, so it's a person with their head kind of face down. They're holding a sword, like kind of up in front of their face, but kind of like up at their third eye, almost like as if you were gonna like put your praying hands up there or meditation hands. And then they have a butterfly that looks like it's been like cut in half. And I think of that butterfly as almost like the clairvoyance, right? The thing you can see, the thing that seems so clear maybe to you, but is maybe not so clear to others, or that we're trying to get across, the point that seems so obvious. And I think this card, right, is warning us against sometimes being too honest, or honest when it's serving us, but maybe it's not actually serving other people, or we're being so honest that it's being very hurtful to others. Instead of just being direct, we're being very blunt about it. So something to keep in mind as a message from, right. So just as a reminder, if you'd like to join me on the journey of using the tarot for transformation, click on the link in the show notes to indicate your interest in receiving more information. We'll be working together for 12 weeks of calls and journaling to discover what happens when we want to transform our lives through the tarot. Links for the tarot decks I talk about will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them or purchase them. And thanks for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast comes out daily, Monday through Friday for all of 2025. And you can email me, me@CamilleASaunders.com with your thoughts, questions, and more. All right, see you soon. Bye-bye.